I'm very excited to bring Nicole, a fellow Googler, up to the stage. And she's going to be talking a lot about user groups we don't talk a lot about, in particular NBU, or the next billion users, and how people are leveraging technology differently than you and I might leverage that technology, and what that's going to mean for what we're developing for them. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Hi, thank you. I'm Nicole. It's nice to meet you. So today, of course, we're talking about growth, but I'm not going to be talking about how to acquire those easy, frictionless users. I want to talk about how to drive growth in the real, messy, complex world where the vast majority of humanity actually lives. Every day, we're building products that are based on this invisible assumption, right? We design for this small orange bubble. Essentially, we're kind of designing for ourselves. And we assume that the default user looks and acts a lot like we do. But that bubble, it's just a tiny fraction of the global market. Your next wave of adoption and revenue, it doesn't live in there. It lives outside in that massive gray area. We tend to build our products as if the entire world operates in this pristine, frictionless bubble. We assume that our user is sitting alone at a desk and they have a high-end device and a stable internet connection and a very high level of digital fluency. But the real world is not a pristine bubble. It's crowded and it's shared and it can be chaotic. And your biggest growth opportunity, it doesn't lie in that pristine bubble. It lies in the friction. It lies in intermittent connectivity and shared devices and low digital confidence. The cost of doing research and design in a vacuum can be really expensive. Did you know that roughly half of apps are getting uninstalled within the first 30 days? Think about that. You're losing half of the people that you paid to acquire almost immediately. Now, if you're at a small startup, you might think, well, that's just a product market fit issue. People just don't want what we're building. But if your product is already at scale, you know that your core value prop is working. So when you break into these new growth areas and then you're immediately losing those users, it's not because they don't want your solution, it's because your product breaks when it hits the friction of their daily lives. So we have to stop treating this as just a bad UX problem, and we really need to start treating it as a retention crisis. Because we celebrate when we acquire these users, but then we completely ignore the fact that they're abandoning the app like almost right away. Growth at scale is not just about reaching new people, it's also about retention. And if your product is not resilient enough to survive outside of that pristine bubble, you're simply not going to grow, and no amount of marketing spend can outpace a product that just doesn't work in the real world. So why are we failing to retain users? Well, for one reason, we heavily rely on demographics to tell us who our users are. And to illustrate this on a very human level, let me introduce you to two women that my fabulous colleagues met during field research. They are Maria and Joanna. On paper, they're the exact same person. They're the exact same age. They earn the same amount of income. They have the same level of education. And they're literally neighbors. They live near each other on the same street. And they both had just gotten their very first smartphones, and they were terrified of breaking them. By every demographic metric that a product team would use, they're identical. Within a year, Maria, she leaned right into exploration of her phone and using the internet. And she moved from basic communication on her phone to using it for more advanced things like online banking. And she even landed a new job that she found through her brand new social media account. So she's the success story that we usually see in our data, the user who naturally progresses. Joanna, though, on the other hand, she never truly escaped the anxiety of that first week with her phone. She would hold her device and say, I don't want to mess anything up. I can't afford to break it. So for Joanna, the phone, it's not just some magical gateway to a new job or a better life. It's this incredibly expensive, fragile object, and she's really terrified of ruining it. So she remained a passive user, and she's relying almost entirely on her daughter to help her navigate the basics of the phone and her apps. Now, she has the same needs as Maria, but she lacks the on-ramps to get there. If you design a product based on demographics, you're going to be building for an average that just does not actually exist, and you're going to completely miss Joanna. Now, you can get away with demographic targeting when you're small. When your audience all looks the same, you can survive on it. But when you scale up, that's going to force a pivot. And if you want to win a massive market, you have to drop the demographic buckets. Because at a global scale, demographics really hide the friction. They completely obscure the actual everyday hurdles that people are facing when they pick up your product and they want to keep using it. This is a rice paddy in Nepal. And you might be wondering, why am I showing you this picture at a UXR conference? Well, before I entered tech, this was essentially my office. I was a regional director for the Gallup World Poll, and I was managing research teams across Asia Pacific to conduct these highly rigorous, face-to-face, interviewer-administered surveys that we conducted actually right inside people's homes. And we didn't just talk to whoever was available. We had to use these very strict probability sampling procedures to select a village, and then from within the village, a household, and then only one respondent from within the home. And all of these methods that we use, they would ensure that the data were then representative of the larger population. And never, ever did we ever use any demographic quota sampling. And doing that kind of research, it really forces you to see how diverse populations actually are living. And so then when I transitioned into the tech industry, I noticed a massive disconnect. The qualitative researchers that I was working with, they were uncovering these deep behavioral insights in the field, but our broader industry was still sizing markets and building products based on these static demographic buckets. We would assume that youth, they're all tech-savvy experts, and rural users, they're all novices. But my background told me that simply wasn't true. And while my core perspective, I'm coming to you with this international perspective, honestly, these principles apply to any high-friction environment, whether it's a family who's sharing an iPad or a new employee who's struggling with complex B2B software. It's all about human behavior in the face of technology. And to actually measure that behavior, to take that nuanced reality that our qualitative researchers at Google were seeing in the field, and then to quantify it, we put to work those rigorous survey methods that I had relied on during my time at Gallup. And we conducted a very large, multi-country survey where we surveyed 13,000 respondents across 13 countries. And then we pooled all of that data together, and we ran a segmentation analysis. And the key is this: we didn't tell the model what to look for. We didn't predefine any groups based on age or gender or income. We just stepped back and we let the data group itself naturally. And what we found were these three behavioral types of internet users, not people that were tied to some kind of demographic grouping. And the first group is the novices. These users have low digital confidence, and they're going to rely heavily on informal teachers in their lives that are helping them navigate their device and apps, just like Joanna had been relying on her daughter. And they have a very deep underlying fear of breaking the technology. Second, we have the proficient users. This is the middle tier. These users, they've built up enough confidence to move beyond passive scrolling, and they're starting to leverage the internet more as a tool for real progress. They're beginning to use digital platforms for higher stakes utilities, things like finding a job or promoting their small business online, or even earning some income online. And ultimately, they're the users that are actively bridging that critical gap between play and productivity. And third are the expert users. Remember that orange bubble from the very beginning of my talk? Well, that's this group. And to be honest, it's probably most of us in this room, too. We're often building our products and conducting research as if they represent the entire world. But expert users, they only make up a very small fraction of the global population. And when we then mapped these segments globally, we found that all three behavioral types exist in every single country that we surveyed. Now, of course, the proportions, they can be very different in each country. But in some countries, those proportions were surprisingly similar. Take Brazil and the US, for example. In both countries, expert users are representing a remarkably similar share of the online population. And an expert user in Brazil is going to behave very similarly to an expert user in the US. Their digital habits, their needs, and their confidence are going to be virtually identical. So this proves that a user's needs can be defined much more by their digital behavior and not about their demographics or where they live. And if your product only works for experts, you're going to be leaving a large chunk of the market on the table. But there's a catch. Once we look past the experts, the users in the US and Brazil, they're going to stop looking so similar to each other, and they're going to start looking quite different. A non-expert in the US, they might be a little hesitant just to try a new app. But a non-expert in Brazil, they're dealing with very intense daily friction. They're highly likely to be sharing their device with other people in the household. And they might be more restricted by very expensive prepaid data plans, and their single phone might be acting as the Wi-Fi router for the entire household. And because of all that, their baseline digital confidence is going to be drastically lower. And I want to be clear, this friction is completely universal. A delivery driver in an emerging market country, they're going to be facing the same exact hurdles as a new hire right here in San Francisco who's learning complex enterprise software. Because friction is friction, right? So if we want to stop losing half of our users in the first month, we have to identify what's blocking them. So let's look at a few common constraints and a few ways that we can unlock them. The first is stalled proficiency. It is incredibly common to assume that if someone has used the internet or your product for years, that they've naturally evolved into a power user. But our global research found that many novice users have actually been online for over 5 years. So they're not new. Their skills have simply stalled, and they're stuck. And this happens in your products, too. Just because a B2B customer has been subscribed to your platform for 3 years, it doesn't mean that they're getting the most out of it. A longtime user, they might be stuck and only using a fraction of your features, and they're constantly frustrated, and they're at a very high risk of churning. To get these users unstuck, the unlock can be a total shift in strategy. We need to move from onboarding them to upboarding them. Right now, we're putting all of our energy into that day one onboarding, right? We dump a massive amount of tutorials on people and just assume that they're going to figure the rest out. But for a user with low digital confidence, that doesn't build skills. It's just going to build anxiety for them. Upboarding is different. It means that we need to deliver continuous, bite-sized learning moments at the exact second that the user actually needs them. And for us as researchers, this could change our jobs and our focus a little bit. We have to stop prioritizing just the first 10 minutes of a user's experience and start studying their entire journey to find out exactly where they need that extra nudge. The second constraint, the shared device reality. We almost always build for a strict 1-to-1 ratio, one user, one device. But out in the real world, device sharing is a massive social norm. When we researched this in India, for example, we found that the vast majority of the adult population were regularly in some kind of sharing arrangement within the household. We're talking about hundreds of millions of people that are navigating a shared device every single day. Now, it's easy to assume, oh, that just happens in that one specific market, but this shared reality is really everywhere, and it goes far beyond personal smartphones. It's the family that's sharing an iPad in their living room, or a small business that's sharing a single login because they just can't afford any more than that, or even a retail worker who's sharing a point-of-sale terminal with other employees. When we uncover this shared reality in our research, we can expose a critical blind spot in user retention. Shared devices create intense privacy barriers. These users that are sharing, they have a very heightened daily need for privacy from their own family and colleagues. So as researchers, we have to stop testing for these isolated, single users, and instead we need to study the shared experience. We have to ask, how easily can they switch profiles? Are the sign-outs intuitive? And are there clear visual cues that show exactly whose account is active? And if we're not testing for this, our product teams are never going to fully understand why that small business just doesn't trust us with their finances, for example. And the third constraint for today that I want to share is about cognitive overload. When users face a dense, feature-heavy interface, they don't just get confused, they can freeze. And this also is a completely universal experience. Think about a new hire who's logging into a complex enterprise software on their first day. And they're hit with nested menus and 25 tabs and a wall of corporate jargon. They're not going to click around to explore. They freeze because they're terrified that with one wrong click and they might email the entire company or delete an entire database. That exact psychological, physiological reaction that they're having is what kills our retention. So when your UI is demanding that a specialized vocabulary is needed just to find the home screen, the user's deciding, this tool it just wasn't built for me. And their perception of it is going to drop to 0. So they're going to abandon it, and they're going to come up with some other workaround. Maybe they'll use a spreadsheet, for example, because the spreadsheet is at least safe. So to get that user out of the spreadsheet, our research needs to push product teams to replace technical intimidation with a more intuitive, visual, and voice-driven path. First, we should test guiding them with motion. When a user's frozen, a wall of text won't help. So we need to try some other options. Test maybe a subtle pulsing animation on your primary button. And it might be just the thing that they need to guide your users to where they need to go in your interface. A second thing we should be researching is alternative inputs. To a user with low digital confidence, seeing a keyboard can be really unnerving. So we should be testing voice interactions, for example. Voice is much faster, and it's just much more comfortable for users, whether it's a novice user who's navigating their first smartphone, or it's a worker who is logging inventory while wearing gloves. And third, we could lead with the visual outcome. So don't give that new hire a text-heavy tooltip on how to configure a database. Instead, test what happens when you show them a preview of the beautiful report that they're about to generate. You're going to eliminate the fear that they would be feeling about that button that they have to click on. So we know some constraints now, but how do we actually execute the research to capture this massive opportunity? Frankly, our methodologies have to adapt, because right now, we rely heavily on research tools that are built for people exactly like us. And when you do that, you're only ever talking to expert users, and you end up designing in an echo chamber. So to break out of that bubble, we need a new playbook, and there's a few things that I can share with you today that you could pretty quickly put into your own work. The first play is to meet users where they are. And the quickest way to fail at this is by only recruiting through email or other digital channels. Sure, for those of us in tech, those feel like the default, right? But for a user with low digital confidence, whether it's a frontline retail worker right here in the US or a new smartphone user on the other side of the globe, an email inbox is formal, it can be intimidating, and it's often just completely ignored. If you're only relying on email or other digital online outreach, you are only going to contact experts. And I know this firsthand very well from running a lot of surveys. When we use a standard email panel for web surveys, we will get back fully zero novice users in our data. But when we switch to those probability methods of selection with interviewer-administered surveys, well, then we're going to capture a representative proportion of novices of the population, which, as you can imagine, is significantly higher than 0. We have to run our research also on the platforms where users actually communicate daily and where they feel comfortable. That might mean that you're running an entire diary study then on WhatsApp, for example. And it also means we should get out of the UX lab. Partner with community advocates. Conduct your intercept surveys in a break room or on a shop floor and in community centers. To really capture this opportunity, your research methods have to adapt and be just as resilient as your users. And the second play, screen for behavior, not for demographics. We have to stop recruiting our research participants based only on their age, their gender, or the job title. Because, as we know, demographics don't tell us the full picture. Think back to Maria and Joanna. If we had recruited just based on women in their 40s, we would assume that they have the exact same needs. But one is an expert, and one is completely stuck. And we make this exact same mistake in the enterprise space, too. We assume that a senior manager is just naturally a power user of our product, or that every 20-year-old Gen Z employee is digitally fluent. But that 20-year-old could be completely frozen in your complex SaaS environment. So whether you are building for a new smartphone user or a new corporate employee, you need to evaluate proficiency by asking some questions like these. Do they actually know what this feature does? Do they have the permissions and the hardware or the connection to it to use it? And how often do they actually perform this task, and how much help are they getting to get it done? When you screen for these specific behaviors, you're going to stop talking to that echo chamber, and you're going to find users like Joanna or that overwhelmed new hire who are actually stuck. And the third play is ask in the most intuitive way. When we are researching behaviors, we cannot expect users to self-identify some abstract concept. For example, if you ask Joanna a direct question like, do you share your phone? She's likely going to say no. Because to her, when she hands her phone to her daughter so she can do her homework, that's not sharing, it's just living. When we first researched this in India, a very, very small proportion of people would answer yes to that direct question. But then we switched to asking a small battery of questions that were very behavioral, like, does someone else regularly use your phone to access the internet or to make and receive phone calls? Well, then the data completely changed and revealed the actual truth, that a much, much larger proportion of the population were in some kind of sharing arrangement with their phone. And this exact same blind spot applies to B2B products, too. If you want to uncover enterprise workarounds, don't ask an employee, do you share your account credentials? They're not going to admit to breaking the rules. Instead, we need to ask, walk me through what happens when your colleague needs to see this dashboard. So if we want accurate data, we have to screen for these tangible actions and not just abstract labels. Understanding this reality is not just a feel-good initiative. It is the core driver of your company's bottom line. Again, think back to Maria and Joanna. If our research only lives inside the pristine bubble, we're going to end up validating fragile products that only Maria can navigate. But when we actively research Joanna's specific frictions, when we test for shared access, and we measure stalled proficiency, and we study cognitive overload, well, then we're giving our product teams the exact blueprints that they need to build something that's faster, more intuitive, and more resilient for everyone. As researchers, we are uniquely positioned to stop our organizations from building in a vacuum. So I challenge you, please, look beyond the frictionless bubble. Stop just looking at your experts and start looking for people like Joanna, because honestly, that is where the growth is waiting for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think our folks are already on the move, so we'll go straight to the audience. Amazing.
Thank you.
First, I want to say thanks for this presentation. I'm right here.
Oh, hi.
Hi. I'm Melinda. I'm a UX researcher, and I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. And first, I want to say, yeah, this really hit home. My father is a Joanna. He's definitely a stuck user, and he's living in rural Romania. And my question would be, when you showed the map, could you, the map of all the countries where you did studies, can you tell me a little bit about what, yeah, that one. So I see, for example, in Europe, there's UK, France, and Germany. And when it comes to geographical locations, can you tell me a little bit more about the reasoning for choosing specific countries?
Absolutely, yeah, thanks for that question. If it were up to me, we would have had 200 countries up there, but we had a specific budget to work within, so I tried to make it as large and representative as possible, and I think these are some of the most populous countries in the world. Of course, China, hard to do research there. Russia, difficult too. So I was trying to get the countries where I was getting the largest representation of the global population, and also at the same time trying to get at least 1 or 2 from each region or sub-region within the world. So yes, I would love to have included other countries, but based on budget and these constraints that we're all under, that was the best that we could do. Thank you for your question.
I see one in the far back. And I'll also say on that, definitely keep in mind it with the first talk, what your goals are, because different countries react to things differently. So I work in privacy and security. Germany is one we always include because Germany is very private. And then inversely, you have ones where it's less safe to be online, or more safe to be online than it is in person. So like India can be your counter to that. But for a study that Nicole's running on search, it might be completely different goals.
Hi. I was wondering, sorry, I'm going to drop everything. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the digital literacy of the individuals. You commented on there that it would be easier for them to receive some sort of screener over like WhatsApp or SMS. So I'm wondering, with all of the phishing scams that often get individuals with low digital literacy, how you kind of balance that and or played into the comfort level of, yes, this is safe, and also this is the potential for you to look in for.
Awesome question, thank you. That's definitely come up a lot in my research, and most of my research in the past few years has been in India, though yes, in these other countries as well, but I've gone most deep in India. And what we do there is we have research teams on the ground who are initiating that face-to-face contact so that there's some level of comfort, and yes, I know this person, they might be from a neighboring village, I feel some comfort, and then we take it to WhatsApp. So there is often that initial contact is made in person. I feel like India is a market where you're most successful when you have that hybrid. Just contacting somebody straight, forget email first of all, and then just going straight away to WhatsApp, I think you're not going to have that level of comfort and being a known person that you need to really be successful. So I personally, I know tech is pushing us to be looking for the most digital ways to be doing things. And I think that we can, but we should meet, like I said on one of the slides, we have to meet people where they are, and maybe it's starting with that face-to-face interaction and then taking it to the digital platforms. Thanks for your question.
Hi, sorry. Firstly, thank you so much for your talk. I resonated with so much of what you had to say. As a user researcher, I've seen through research over and over again how demographics rarely correlate with user outcomes, but it's something that our stakeholders like to really focus on. And when they don't see those correlations, it makes them lose trust in the results of our study. How would you recommend that we deal with situations like that?
Are you saying that they expect in the study that the outcome will correlate with demographics?
Yeah, they like to see very sort of easy correlations, like people with this income have these behaviors, people with this educational backgrounds have these tendencies, but we don't see that. It's not that neat.
Yeah, it's everything. That is the foundation of this entire 25 minutes that I've been standing up.
Yeah.
I mean, for us, it was very powerful once we had this segmentation that we ran. And I know that not everyone can go run this multi-country segmentation, but if there's some, and the reason it was powerful is because we got these groups back and the age, gender, everything across groups was the same. So the most novice group was also equally as young and old as the most expert group. The age brackets were the same. So that was powerful when I could show them it's not age that's driving whatever usage or uptake on your product, it's actually behaviors. So, I mean, it's hard for me to tell you how to get, unless you could run a segmentation, maybe you can, but having some kind of data point to show them that it's not their demographics that are driving their behaviors, it's something else, I think can be very powerful. Yeah, it's a tough one though. Thank you for your question.
I love it. We have time for one more.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm not a researcher, I'm a conversation designer, but as part of my job, we used to also have to do some little UX research, trying to understand the needs of the users, trying to understand better what is it that they need to do so that we can come up with better designs. And by the way, I'm thinking about switching completely to research because I feel that I'm more there. But I wanted to ask you about one of your suggestions. You were suggesting to ask behavioral questions rather than direct questions. So that to me, when I was thinking about that, it seemed like you need to know the people beforehand so that you know how to ask based on their behavior. Is that the case, or how do you transition from direct questions to behavioral questions?
I think my best example is the one that I mentioned about the phone sharing, where I didn't know them before, but I had the luxury of measuring it several times in a survey. So I got to like iterate on it. And having spent a lot of time in India, I knew that this low percentage of people in my survey who said they shared a phone, I knew that wasn't accurate. And then I went and did cognitive interviewing. And this is, I think, a very powerful tool for pre-survey, where I'm like testing out, kicking the tires on my survey questions. And I realized that nobody thinks of it as sharing. It's just like it's just life. Like, yeah, my friend picks up my phone. Yeah, my husband picks up. Yeah, it's the Wi-Fi router for the household. All of these things. So then I realized, like, I can't use that label sharing. I have to ask, what does sharing mean? I had to break it down. Oh, does somebody make phone calls on your phone? Does somebody use the internet on your phone? Does somebody text message on your phone? That's really what sharing is, right? I don't need that label, which it was too abstract to them. So for me, it was that triangulation of spending a lot of time in the field, knowing that culture, and then also like seeing it fail and getting to iterate on it. That's the method that I had used. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank
that was
you
brilliant.
so much. Oh, that was fun. Thank you.
See you back at the office.